Okay, so we worked together, 5 teachers from 5 different colleges, and the success of this project was just by the sheer determination of our teachers. The title project did change a little over the time, but in essence, we wanted to see how all of these participants responded to mastery approaches in maths. So in 2014, the ETF has published a very lengthy report identifying the connections across the functions in most colleges, which they found were fragmented and with each area working very independently with no real relevant connections aside from a student having to go to maths lessons and a maths lesson having to be timetabled. I expect you recognise yourselves trying to inject that learner. So the literature suggested ways in which the maths and the vocational areas can work together, inferring connection and collaboration. And the outcome of this is a structure that's tight around the learner and giving support and structure. So the methods we use for to achieve this, we use the teacher reflection, confidence ratings, teacher interviews, all via appreciative inquiry. So math teachers and vocational teachers needed to understand what the mastery techniques were. So we set out ways in which we could link the vocational teaching to the maths mastery, getting teachers working together and being able to share this with the learners in a coherent way. We did this by using the ratio table and manipulatives in context. For cycle 1, it was it was basically to increase teacher and learner confidence with the ratio table using the RME approach. Using context with the ratio table, here is Seema to explain the approach and the effect it had on our teachers. Over to Seema.
Thank you, Catherine. So we used the petrol lesson to introduce the learners to the ratio table for the first time in the classrooms. To capture the learners' buy-in and engagement, we explained how learners were part of a national project. The students appreciated this because the explanation, it gave them a reason for learning a new technique. Then we asked students to be honest and do a pre-intervention reflection in their books, just a phrase to say how they felt about learning a new technique. And then the petrol lesson began with a whole class discussion. The discussion was about driving, comparing petrol vehicles to electrical vehicles, the effect of fuel emissions on the climate. All students were engaged. I think that was really important. They all had an opinion to voice, and the topic was personal and relevant. The first question was posed as the first ratio table format was introduced. We walked through the structure of the ratio table, drawing attention to the connections between the 2 rows on the ratio table. The idea of how students could find out more information from the table if they wanted. Learners were asked to fill in the gaps on the first ratio table, and they worked in pairs. Any errors they made were pointed out, but what we found was that as students saw where an error was made, they were able to self-correct. The format of the ratio table allowed students to see the whole picture regarding their calculations, and they self-identified where they'd gone wrong. Learners found the answer to the question posed, which was how much the journey to Newcastle would cost driving a petrol vehicle. And they found this using the ratio table. The learners seemed to be gaining a deeper understanding between the relationship between the 2 rows on the ratio table, and that was quite apparent as we went through the lesson. The second table was then introduced. Learners were encouraged to begin their investigation using that table. As you can see, it's not populated, and there's quite a wordy question there. But once we'd given them the initial prompt, they began to fill in the table. They worked together in groups of 2 or 3, and they were able to compare the cost of a journey using a petrol engine versus an electrical engine. So they seemed to enjoy this. They enjoyed working in pairs. They found the context very, very relevant and interesting. Then what we found, and then they were able to answer the question as well, which was most beneficial to them, an electric car or a petrol car. Then learners were asked to make a note of their reflections post-intervention as well. And we found from analysis of the pre and post reflections that all students acknowledged that the usefulness of the ratio table as a technique. The stronger students, who had initially been quite negative about learning a new technique, saying they already had the skills to find the answers, we'd won them over. They saw the technique as useful. And the weaker maths students seemed to gain the most confidence from this technique. They were more willing to tackle the question. I think that was the most impactful finding of the whole intervention.
Okay, thank you,
Catherine.
Thank you, Seema. From the literature review, from the literature review, we continued basically with cycle 1 through while we sort of developed on cycle 2, and the literature review we found that we created this vocational maths board, and as teachers mastered the ratio table, they were able to then connect to the vocational teachers to co-produce a maths board made of magnets, which provided manipulatives required to explain particular topics and variables in the vocational area. We used the ratio table to help teachers and learners develop their own understanding of the manipulative reasoning. So here's In-Young to tell us about the impact that had with our vocational teachers. Are you on mute, In-Young?
Thank you, Catherine. When you're hearing the vocational math board, you might think that this is a really, great, something to do with the, jargon. But as you can see in the pictures, it's just a simple board, which has got a mathematical context. And then Catherine and then I provided it to the vocational area. So we just named it as a vocational math board. And then as Seema highlighted, this vocational math board was brought the amazing positive impact, because not only math board, we provided them small strips of magnetic manipulative pieces. So when they drew the mastery method of ratio tables, they could manipulate using their fingers. And then on the right-hand side in the empty area, so when I visited, for example, the plumbing area, they drew the diagram of the, the tube. What do you say? In the plumbing area, you just, insert all the tubes. So they drew the diagram and then linking to the ratio tables using the mastery techniques and then manipulating with pieces. So as Seema said, they can see the visual impact of the ratio tables. And that they could spot their patterns, and then they could spot their errors and then identify it. So teachers themselves said, wow, it's amazing. I understand much clearer. And then I really feel confident. That's what they said. And then some of them said, so we said, why don't we put it in your workshop? Because all the vocational area has got their own workshop. So they were using it. And then they said, oh, my learners, they said, they passed the exam because of this one. And the plumbing area said, when it finished, after even finished this action research cycle, they said, oh my gosh, my tutors are continuously using this vocational math board in our workshop. Depending on the context, they just simply rub it out and then explaining with the students. Then all the students come out and then play with the, the magnetic strips, and then by manipulating, and then some of them drew the related diagrams, so that math board became their all collaborative math tool. So it has a really, really positive impact. And then they said they're going to use it continuously in their workshop. And the beauty lecturer said, this is going to change my life. Mm-hmm. So this is a simple tool, just brought a really, really great positive impact, and then with our mastery method. Thank you.
Thank you, In-Young. So bringing mastery back into the classroom, we sort of continue to do the cycle 2, but we came back to the drawing board about getting maths back into the classroom. And we got some feedback from vocational teachers that were finding graphs particularly difficult for learners to understand, especially level 3 learners. There was quite a bit of graph work that they had to do to understand graphs. So we decided to go back to the concrete experience using a human number line. So here's a video, so bear with me. Hope everybody could hear it.
Number line activity. What we did is we took the students outside and lined them up against the wall. We gave them all numbers starting with 0, 1, 2, 3. And then what we did is we gave them an instruction. So times your number by 3 and then take that many steps. What they realized is depending on which number they were times in their number by, it changed, you know, the gradient of their line, their sequence. And it was really interesting to see them sort of realize the shape that they'd made, and what happened, you know, the bigger the number that they were, their starting number, you know, the further they had to walk, etc. The most important part about this was the student that was the 0 number, the very, very first person, because he didn't move when we were multiplying. He realized that it didn't matter, you know, what he had to times his number by. He didn't take any steps at all until we started giving them instructions like multiply your number by 2 and then add 4. He realized then he would move 4 steps. The really interesting thing for him was when there was, you know, a negative instruction, that he would have to move backwards because he hadn't taken any steps forward, and he realized, you know, that he couldn't do that. But the interesting part was that he understood that he needed to go backwards. So when we went back to the classroom, they were all discussing, you know, he was number 0 and then he wasn't moving. And it was really interesting for them, that the importance of that 0 term, which really helped with the next stage that we went to.
Seema, what about you? How did you feel about the experience?
Similarly, the students enjoyed the whole experience. I think they understood how to apply the coordinates for a graph. They were able to see the gradients that they formed on their number lines. They were able to interpret the gradients. So the whole activity, because it was an activity rather than sitting at a desk in a chair, was more memorable for all of them.
They felt silly at first. I don't know about yours, but they didn't want to do it. But then I think as we were doing it, they realised the importance of the activity and they did get quite involved.
They did, and they remembered it, and they told their friends, and it created a bit of fun.
That's great. And what about this bit? Seema, you particularly like, or you both like this part. Which bits of it did you like, and why?
I liked all the resources because it allowed me to teach the equation, substitution into an equation, the sequence, the nth term. The students were able to visualize it, and they're able to do everything in the resource, and which is really important. Although I always stress that it's not always the most important thing to get the right answer. It's important to try, but they're all able to do it and get the right answer at the end, and see the steps and relate it to the activity. So I use this for all my classes.
Yeah, it really helped build that platform between, you know, their understanding of an equation of a line, which was the basic, you know, the concrete walking, taking steps, very, very basic, to actually plotting it on a graph. And it made that transition really nice. And they realized, you know, oh, I multiplied by 2 and then added 3. And it was really interesting to see them just go, oh, okay, we did this outside. And it was exactly the same skill. It didn't matter, you know, which of these exercises they did, they were using the same skill, the same basic maths to get there. And my class was the same as Seema's. Everybody that did it and understood it got it right, all of it. And it was quite interesting to see, because if you'd have just given them, you know, plot the graph y equals 2x minus 1, they wouldn't have been able to do that had they not had all the information before.
No, the connections between all the stages was really important, I think, for them within, and to be able to deliver it in a short period of time rather than take maybe a few more weeks.
Yeah, they understood it in 2 sessions, whereas it might have taken longer had we not done it the way that we did.
Yeah.
And how about the nth term? I know you had a great experience, Rini. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I had a student in my class that as soon as I mentioned, you know, this can be used for nth term as well, she sort of went, I hate nth term, I've never understood it, I don't get it, and sort of switched off. And when I explained to her, okay, well, look at the sequence. What can you say about it? Well, it goes up in 4s. Okay, so that's 4n. I said, okay, and what would he? I said, what number would he have been? How many steps would he have taken? Oh, 2. So +2. And it was really interesting. That's why the importance of that 0 term was really, really useful, because I don't think they'd been shown that method before. And because of how much, you know, they were interested in that 0 person, the person that wasn't moving, they thought it was quite funny at the time, you know, he's not going anywhere, or he's got to go backwards, or things like that. It made it much easier when we were doing the nth term. They were like, is that it? Is that it? And I said, that's it. We've done all the work to get there. It's not that that's just it. You understand it. That's why it seems quite easy. It was almost like she didn't believe us that that was it. It was just that's as hard as it's got. And I don't know. She just said, well, why can't all lessons be like that? Why can't everything be taught that way? And it was really nice. And she got the whole worksheet right. She got all of the nth term parts right. And then even the second part, when we gave them the worksheet, you know, with everything just as graphs, not with twigs and leaves, she got everything right on that as well. And she gave it to me and she said, I don't think it's right. And she gave it to me and I just went tick, tick, tick. She went, is that it? And she just kept saying, is that it? I couldn't believe it. But no, it was really, really good. And yeah, really nice to see that she'd hated it for however long and just straight away switched off. But it made a difference to her.
That's what they were talking through. Anyway, so here are the conclusions. I'll let you just read through those. Yeah, so basically I had a big impact. And any questions? So put any questions in the chat.